Hello everyone, and welcome to section 2 on our chapter on the beginnings of Islam. Now in the last section we talked about the rise of Islam, how it began, and some basic understandings of the traits of the religion itself and the culture. In this lecture we're going to talk about how it expanded, become an influencing cultural, religious, political, military group across the Middle East, North Africa, and parts of Europe. So if you take a look here on the Arabian Peninsula in blue there, down to the southeast corner, that is really what, at the time of Muhammad's death, that was the Islamic State. Okay, that was the Islamic area of control. And very quickly, over the next 100 or so years, you're going to see the Islamic empire expand to control much of the area that you're seeing here. Okay. Now, as we move forward, to set the stage, just to make sure you guys understand, Muhammad dies in the year 632. Okay, so only 2 years after he takes Mecca and consolidates the Arabian Peninsula. The religion is in crisis, as well as the state, because there's no leader. So the question is this a problem? And we know that it is. And if so, what issues might appear going forward? Okay, so to understand this, we need to understand who his successors are. So Muhammad didn't name a direct successor, but so basically what ends up happening is, following the customs of the culture that was in place, that existed for centuries in Arabia, they decide to appoint Abu Bakr as the first caliph, okay, which means successor or deputy. So Abu Bakr is going to take control of not only the religion, but of this state. And he's going to be the first of what are going to be known as the rightly guided caliphs. The other three are Umar, Uthman, and Ali. And you see all four of them on the screen here in front of you. And the reason why they're known as the rightly guided caliphs is because they knew Muhammad. They directly had contact with him, and they were close to him. So therefore, they could reasonably understand what he would want to have had done moving forward. What they do is they use the Quran and Muhammad's teachings to lead the Islamic State, which is going to be known at this time as the Caliphate. Now, there's some initial problems, however. First off, a lot of tribes start to abandon Islam, or they refuse to pay the taxes that are supposed to be paid, because they see that the main figure in every single way is dead. And you even have some go as far to declare themselves as their own prophets. They stay Muslim, but they declare themselves as the prophet for Allah. So what ends up happening is Abu Bakr invokes what is known as a jihad. Now, this is known as the striving. It has two meanings. Okay, we typically associate jihad in its negative connotation with terrorism. This is not what it means here. It means as a striving to get the people back. Okay, and Abu Bakr is reasonably successful in terms of being able to do this. Remember that the traits that the Muslims developed from the Bedouins, we talked about in the first section, great military skill. He's able to use the army of the Caliphate to help him kind of rein everything back in. Now, Abu Bakr is not going to live very long. He's not going to control very long. He only lives until 634. Okay, so only 2 years under his control. Just like we saw after Muhammad took Mecca, he only lived 2 years. So you got a lot of turmoil here and change of leadership. However, by the time of Abu Bakr's death, he's able to control all of Arabia. He's able to reestablish that. So you see here on the map here, he has control of the Arabian Peninsula. That's a significant base with him to start, or with his successors to start, Umar and Ali. Now, Umar and Ali, they begin fighting the Byzantines and the Sassanids. And they start to expand the empire really very quickly. And the empire is going to stretch with these beginning campaigns all the way from the Indus River Valley in the east, so coming into contact with India, all the way to the Atlantic Ocean, as the empire touches the coast of North Africa and the Iberian Peninsula. So that's going to be a huge, huge, wide area that the Islamic Caliphate and faith is going to be able to have contact with and control. Okay, now we need to talk about the Byzantine Empire here, because the Byzantine Empire is going to be the Islamic Empire's greatest enemy at the beginning. Here on this map, you can see the Byzantine Empire's area of control at its greatest extent. And if you look here, this is the Arabian Peninsula down here. So this is where the Islamic Caliphate is, and they're going to be pushing across and come to control much of this area throughout North Africa, the Iberian Peninsula, and then Anatolia and the Balkans eventually. But we'll get into that more specifically as we move throughout this course. Here you can see this is actually what's going to happen to the Byzantine Empire just in a couple of maps. This is what I was trying to show you guys with the cursor here on the last slide. The Arab Caliphate is pushing up and encroaching into the Byzantine territory. And as you can see, the Byzantines are slowly going to be losing territory here. And you can't see it on this map, but by this time, you can see that they had controlled the Byzantines had controlled North Africa here. By the time of this map in 867, this is under the control of the Caliphate. All right, so there's some reasons for success for why the Islamic Caliphate was able to expand so quickly. Okay, one, the Caliphs were successful because they followed Muhammad's teachings. It allowed people that lived the faith and understand who he was as a political and religious and military leader. They could look at it and say, okay, they're following what he was trying to do. So that brought a lot of people in. Two, Muslims viewed expansion as full support for God, defending their religion, but also defending Allah. Okay. Three, their armies were very disciplined, very, very well trained, and had very good commanders. Again, that trait with the Bedouins that they get from the Bedouin people, being skilled military commanders and fighters, that helps them. They're much better fighters and more organized than a lot of the troops that they're going to come up against, specifically against the Sassanid and Byzantine empires. Four, the Sassanid Empire and the Byzantine Empire are starting to fall apart or have cracks. Their weaknesses are going to be used to the advantage of the Arabic Caliphate or Islamic Caliphate. The empires are starting to crumble in some form. More importantly, are the last two dashes you see on the screen. Harsh treatment of the peoples for centuries is starting to erode faith in those empires. And Islam comes in, it's monotheistic, which many of the people, specifically the Byzantine Empire, are already monotheistic, but it offers equality. And it offers a way out of this harsh treatment from what they're seeing from their leaders. So people flock to the religion and flock to the empire in all ways because of the equality aspect. And we see this throughout many different cultures in history. If there's something that's new but fairly similar to what was in place, whether it's religious, culturally, politically, whatever, but it offers more equality, you see a huge success and more quick. That culture is able to expand very quickly. Excuse me. All right, so here's what happens with conquered peoples under the Islamic faith. One, the Quran forbids forced conversion. So you can't, under the Islamic faith, you can't go and force somebody to convert to Islam. Two, conquered peoples, and this is another reason why they flock to it, they don't have to become Muslim because they can't be forced, but also they're allowed to practice their own religion. And like I said previously on the previous slide, if a new group comes in and you're allowed to live your life pretty much without a huge change and practice what you've done before or improve upon it, people are going to follow that. Three, Jews and Christians receive special considerations. You have to remember back in terms of the last slide that we talked about in the first section. It's because they're the people of the book. They have a special connection with the Islamic faith. They're connected through religious texts. They're connected through religious figures, as well as their origins. Okay, with all connections being back to Abraham. So therefore, they have special considerations over other people. Okay, there are some special restrictions that are put in place. There is supposed to be no spreading of your religion. You can practice it, but you're not supposed to spread it. Okay, Islam is supposed to be the main religion, but you can still practice what you have. You just can't spread it. And then also others that aren't Muslim have to pay a special poll tax or special tax. I believe it's called the jizya, to practice that in the culture. Okay, now along the equality aspect, this is another benefit. You don't have to be Muslim to be higher up in society within the Islamic Caliphate. You can be an official at higher places of government. You can be a government bureaucrat. You can be a scholar, and so forth. You have the ability to move up the ladder, social ladder, and not be Muslim. Okay, now, although there's equality and so forth and going on, there is internal conflict throughout the Islamic Caliphate, primarily because there's no specific order in terms of succession. So in 656, the third of the four rightly guided caliphs, Uthman, is murdered. Now, when he's murdered, this leads to a civil war in the caliphate. Now, it's all over who's going to be the successor. The last of the rightly guided caliphs is Ali. He's supposed to be the natural successor to the leader of the caliphate, the caliph. But he gets challenged by Muawiyah of Syria. And that is ultimately what leads to the civil war. Who's going to be the successor? Now, Ali is assassinated in 661. When he dies, that means the elective system is gone. He's the last to know Muhammad. Okay, he's the last one to have a direct connection to Muhammad himself. So there's nobody that can have that direct connection. So now they have to figure out how this is going to work. Now, ultimately what ends up happening is the Umayyads that start in Syria take control of the caliphate. And they move the capital of the caliphate from Mecca to Damascus for two reasons. One, it's more centrally located to the empire. And two, that's where they're from Syria. That's their main base of power. Now, under the Umayyads, they abandon the simple life. They start to surround themselves with wealth. And this is a problem because for many Muslims across the caliphate, because this is something that Muhammad preached, is that you shouldn't surround yourselves with wealth. You can live comfortably, but you don't surround yourself with wealth and become focused on it, because then that'll lead to problems in life later on down the line. And this is going to cause a division within the religion versus following Muhammad's basic teachings to the T versus kind of taking some liberties. So what this ultimately does is it leads to a split. It leads to a split of the religion to really three different, what we would think of in terms of sects. Okay, the two main ones are the Sunni and Shia. Now, the majority of Muslims side with the Umayyads, which the Umayyads focus on the idea of Sunnis. Okay, and basically the whole idea is that if you're a Sunni, you follow Muhammad's example. You look at what he would do, or try to figure out what he would do, or talk about within past rulings and so forth by the rightly guided caliphs and himself, as well as the Quran, and rule that way. There's a minority that resist, and they believe that the caliph, no matter what, needs to be a descendant of the Prophet, so somebody that was related to him. And these people take the name the Shia, or the party of Ali, okay, after the last of the rightly guided caliphs. There's a third and even smaller group that are known as the Sufi, that say you should lead a life of poverty and direct devotion, but we won't talk about them too much. Now, this Sunni-Shia split is still very important to this day. We've seen hundreds of thousands that have been if not millions, that have been affected by this split between the Islamic faith. Whether it's like you see the difference between the Iraqis, who are mainly Sunni, and the Iranians, who are mainly Shia, and they've fought wars in the last 40, 50 years between themselves because of this split primarily. We still see issues with this today. Now, there's some changes in powers. Change in power after some time. So by the year 750, there's a group that is able to gain enough power within the caliphate that they overthrow the Umayyad Dynasty of the caliphate. These are known as the Abbasids. And what they ultimately do is they try to hunt down and murder the remaining Umayyads. Now, the Umayyads some are able to flee to Spain, which is under the southern part of the Iberian Peninsula, or what we would say Spain in Portugal today. Is under Muslim control. They're able to flee there. Abd al-Rahman sets up another caliphate or another Umayyad caliphate there. Now, this is going to be important because Abd al-Rahman is going to lead a Berber army. Berber is kind of the North African term or similar group of people to the Middle Eastern Bedouins. He's going to lead an army north through Spain, across the Pyrenees Mountains, into France. And ultimately, he's going to be killed and be defeated by Christian forces under Charles Martel at the Battle of Tours in 732. That's a very important date for you guys to know, but we'll talk about that later when we get to chapter 13. Ultimately, what's going to happen is there's going to be an Islamic state that's going to be known as Al-Andalus that's going to set up and be in control in southern Spain, as you see on the map there. Now, under the Abbasids, they moved the capital, just like the Umayyads did. They moved it from Mecca to Damascus. The Abbasids are now going to move it from Damascus to Baghdad, primarily because Baghdad, again, is just like Damascus was originally. It's more centrally located, and it allows them to consolidate their power from a centralized base. And Baghdad is a much, much more important city as a trade and communication hub. They set up a very strong bureaucracy, so organized governmental system. They have a dedicated treasury. They have an organized military and organized departments for business to make sure that they can kind of delegate control. And with that, they send diplomats all over their empire or all across the caliphate to take care of affairs. They tax the land. They set up importing and exporting ideals and understandings and duties, and make sure that all non-Muslims send in their taxes on time to help maintain the wealth of the empire and maintain their rule. And as you guys can see in the map, the Abbasids control the green area, and typically, we just talked about the Umayyads, the Al-Andalus, they're over here. So they kind of control a separate caliphate. All right, so there's some independent rivals that develop at this time. And this may seem a little bit confusing because if you look at the two maps here, you're going to see some crossover specifically as you get into North Africa, as well as Mecca and Medina and what we'd consider like Israel today. So the Abbasids had very strong power, but they had rivals spring up at various times. And so throughout the caliphate, independent states actually developed to come to dominate smaller regions across the caliphate itself. And you have to think about this. Why is that? Well, think about the time period. It's very difficult to control an entire region or entire area by one rule, because you don't have immediate availability of transportation to say, all right, if there's a problem, go here really quick like we do today. So you can actually have regional powers develop and still run under the same empire. And one of these, and the biggest one, is the Fatimid, which were descendants of Fatima, Muhammad's daughter, that develops in North Africa. And this is where you see the overlap across the two maps here. And they connect themselves really in every single way with the Abbasids. It's kind of a regional power within the empire, if that makes any sense, without getting into too many specifics that aren't for this course. And then lastly here, sorry for the skipping here, we're just going to talk about the trade networks and we're going to end. So trade is very important for the Muslims. Sea trade specifically, they have the Red Seas and the Mediterranean Seas that allow them not only to trade and move across the caliphate, but with other parts of the world, whether it's Europe, out to Asia, or Africa. And it allows that connections with the Silk Road to be even more prevalent. Okay, now they only use one language and one currency. That's important. And that's again kind of leading back to the idea of Arabic within the Quran. It allows that connection today, or allows that connection to kind of help them with not only consolidating power, but to spread their wealth and influence. Today, we see that across many different cultures, specifically the United States. We have the euro in the European Union and so forth. So that's kind of a predecessor to what we see going on today. So that's important. Next, you have banks. They set up a banking system that has credit. They called it SACS. That is going to lead itself. There's going to be a European origin later on that we'll talk about in terms of credit system and banking that comes out of the Crusades. And the reason why that develops is because of, if you guys know, the Crusades being religious conflicts between Islam and Christianity. And Christians are going to bring back a lot of cultural traits that they're going to have in connections with the Muslims in those conflicts. And then lastly here, you have cities. They explode during this period because of the amount of wealth that's coming in. Any time that you see a boom in trade, whether it's in Islam or European cities or wherever throughout history, you see an explosion of culture in cities. Specifically, you see arts take off, sciences, and cultural achievements like architecture and so forth just become much more prevalent during those periods. And you see this during this time in the rise of the caliphate here at this period. All right, just a couple more maps here to kind of show you these trade networks in the Silk Road again. We looked at them in the last section. You can see the connections. And this one I think is a little bit more important. Look at all of these routes that run across the Islamic world that we've talked about how it expanded. You're seeing all the way from the Indus River Valley to the Atlantic Ocean. Look at that control. They control that entire region, whether it's people from Europe want to trade in this area, Africa, or Asia. So that's all we have here for section 2. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will see you shortly for section 3. Have a good one.